Hey, what's up out there? It's David Duford at Final Expense Agent Mentor, home of the best final expense training you'll ever find anywhere on the internet. And today I'm going to specifically talk about my 5 top final expense carriers for 2018. And before that, of course, I'm becoming better at promoting what I do so you know exactly what I could do to help you out. First thing I want to show you is my official guide to selling final expense insurance. Perhaps you've heard about this awesome book. It is a highly ranked highly reviewed book on Amazon.com that teaches new and experienced agents how to better sell final expense. The book has scripts, training, carrier suggestions, everything imaginable to help you become the best final expense agent you can. Again, you can find that book on Amazon.com. If you prefer to read off of an ebook type of setup, you can go to my website. It's feagentmentor.com. Click the buy book here, link at the top, something like that, and you can purchase it right away. So the topic of today's video is my 5 favorite final expense carriers for 2018. However, what I want to focus on before I go into why these carriers are why I like them, I want to spend some time explaining to you the elements of a final expense carrier that I think make a carrier good. You see, I think it's not just enough to be in a position to where I just tell you what to do and you do it. Nothing wrong with that. You should have a little bit of just following orders as an agent, as a salesperson. But it's important to understand what kind of elements are important when it comes to picking an insurance carrier to work in the final expense business, because final expense as an industry, as a sales process, is unique to other life insurance types of niches. And you got to understand the elements behind what's necessary to become successful in this business first before you go out and start picking carriers wholesale. There's a lot of different life insurance carriers that sell final expense. The truth is the vast majority of them suck at it. They're not good at it. They've got some big issue with them, they're pricing, underwriting, something like that. And so what will follow here, in addition to the 5 carriers that I think are great, are the 5 must-haves that you must have when selecting a final expense carrier to work with. So let's start with the first one. The first one is a phone interview. So what is a phone interview? If you're new to final expense, a phone interview is where you pick the phone up, ring, ring, and you talk to an underwriter, usually a third-party outsourced operation like Aptical, to determine the insurability of your final expense prospect. You do this before you leave the home. And in best case scenarios, you actually get a decision that you've either been approved or been declined and know what to do from there. So when you leave the home, you can leave with confidence that your deal is closed, that the client knows they've got their coverage, that they don't have anything to worry about. This is really good, I think, for especially brand new agents to final expense. You're going to be inundated with all the information that comes along with learning a new business, after all, right? You've got to learn carriers. You've got to learn the sales process. You've got to learn how to work the leads. You've got to learn door knocking, cold calling, prospecting on the phone, closing, handling objections. Why add more uncertainty to your business when you can take some steps to secure a level of peace of mind? This is where a phone interview product comes in handy. In fact, I'm of the persuasion that if you start in final expense and you pick several handful of carriers, I usually recommend 2 to 3, that your primary carrier should be a phone interview-based company. And by just doing this, you're going to find out that you're going to be a lot better writing deals, keeping them on the books. And the thing is if you write a deal that doesn't do a phone interview and it gets declined or rated up, dude, you've got like half the chance of actually getting back in there and reselling these people. So you want to do everything possible to close the deal rock solid in the first call, because every attempt to go back afterwards to try to fix something just reduces your chance of keeping it on the books. I wish it wasn't that way, but since 2011, I've been doing final expense. It's kind of the way it is. Number 2, simplified application. So when I say simplified application, all final expense products that you'll be looking at are what's called simplified issue whole life insurance. So simplified issue whole life insurance, essentially, if you don't know, minimal look back on health history, typically 2 years approximately, a lot of leniency on medication usages, a lot of leniency on other issues that more fully underwritten traditional policies would not like. You can get all sorts of health issues approved that would normally cause huge table ratings or declines with traditional life insurance companies. So that's, when I say simplified issue, that's what I mean. That's all final expense companies. However, when I say simplified application, what I'm specifically talking to is in the sense, the design of the application as well as the length of the application. So here's the thing. The more pages that you are responsible for to sign off on, the more signatures you have to put down, the more dates you have to put down, the more extra forms that seem redundant but are necessary, and you'll get kicked back. The more you have to sign, the more room for error that you have to go get an amendment, or you have to go get an initials and go back to the client and get their signature in order to fully approve the plan. Obviously, the problem with this approach is that if you have a setup where you've got to go back and forth to your client constantly, you're in that situation I just described. You're taking a one-call business and turning it into a multiple-call business, and you're going to reduce the amount of business that you would have sold had you had done a carrier that was simplified in its application design. And you're also spending less time with new prospects, okay? So it's a deleterious type of setup that you want to avoid. So I like applications that are 3, 4, 5, 6 pages in length. I also like applications, and I'm kind of new to this, being the technological Luddite I am, that are e-application based. That eliminates all of the issues when it comes to missing dates and signatures. It's all automated online. It's really easy to do. You can carry a laptop and do it on your phone, tablet. As long as you got internet access, you can have everything signed and completed right there face to face. It's super easy and makes your life simple. Number 3 here on the list is no BS underwriting. All right, so here's the thing. I'll give you a quick story. So a couple of years ago, I was working with a major final expense carrier most final expense agents have heard of. And I wrote about 10 applications in a couple of weeks period of time. Just liked how the design of the policy worked. And I learned that out of the 10 I submitted, and these, I'm final expense agent mentor. I know my underwriting. Out of the 10 I submitted, I had like 5 or 6 that got kicked back and rated up. And I looked closely at these applications and realized that everything I did was scrubbed. I looked at the health history on the carrier as it relates to the client. It checked out. The medications were fine. Everything was kosher. But I was getting these rate-ups that had no absolute sensibility to them whatsoever. And so I found out through the grapevine that this company, in addition to its underwriting standards that it gives you in its book, right, they have another set of underwriting standards that they don't give their agents, okay? So what happens is when you submit a case, it runs through this other filter, and it may get rated up without any indication when you're sitting down with your client that that was even possible. So I ask you this: why would you work with a carrier that's going to make a simplified issue, one-call business, end up turning into, more than half the time, a second, third, fourth call business that ultimately causes you not to write nearly as much business in the long run? It might take you out of the business. Why waste your time with a carrier like that? So when I say no BS underwriting, that's an example of BS underwriting. No BS underwriting is black and white, okay? Now, not all the time can you get a carrier that's black and white on underwriting, but you want to know if a certain health condition, a certain medication usage is either acceptable or it's not, okay? You want to know exactly going into this baby if your case is going to get approved or not, and especially if you have a phone interview to help solidify that. But the more issues that you're going to have with with a lack of clarification on underwriting, the higher likelihood you just want to stay away from that carrier. And again, there's several carriers that supposedly do a lot of business in final expense that are just, they have so much gray area in their underwriting. And I know there's agents that are just, kicking themselves for working with these companies because of just all the kickbacks they get, issues that they experience because of underwriting. Number 4, competitive pricing. So I think that when it comes to final expense, you don't have to be the low price leader. I think it helps. I think this business essentially is, as far as the products goes, it's a commodity. There's really no brand name recognition in this business. Nobody's walking around asking for Mutual of Omaha or Gerber or any particular companies. They just buy what you sell them. What you sell the client on is yourself, okay? So that's number 1. That's 90% of the salesmanship that's done, is convincing them that you're an expert and you're trustworthy. The company you pick is a foregone conclusion. But the reality of the market we deal with is that they're going to see another final expense agent within 3 or 6 months. And if you don't sell them the most competitive premium, all it takes is not even a good agent. It can be a moderately okay agent to walk in the door behind you and just compare what they have to what you have as the agent walking in. And many times you'll just replace that old overpriced coverage and find out at the end of the day that, it ain't personal, it's business. Because these people are on a fixed income. They make $1,000 a month, and saving $20 a month, while it may seem like not a big deal to us, is huge to these people. So I think it's important to find carriers that are competitively priced. So as much as possible, you can reduce or minimize, you won't eliminate it completely, the replacement risks that are out there. Again, this is why I'm a big advocate, on a side note, of not being a part of a captive agency if you can help it, because they won't tell you about the replacement problems. They won't tell you how, when an independent agent comes in and they see the company named after American president, that their policies there, like the knives are out, okay? All it takes is to make a connection with that client, which is not hard. There's not a lot of loyalty in this business, just to be straight up with you, to come in and just show and compare and contrast. And so it really takes an outstanding agent from a captive company to convince somebody to pay $200, $300, $400 more a year for their life insurance for the rest of their lives than to let them go somewhere that's a better price. So I think it's important to be competitively priced along the lines of being a broker too, as well, just to make sure you minimize lapses, minimize not takens, and the issues that come in a business that is competitive. Let's just face it. All right, reason number 5, or number 5 must have, good back-end support. So I think this is, none of these reasons or must-haves are better than others. It's going to be a personal thing between each agent. I think, though, ultimately, when we're looking at back-end support, it's really important that you get notified when there's a lapse as quickly as possible. You get notified if a person gets declined as quickly as possible, or if there's rate ups or call-ins if something happens when you cancel. You should have access to an agent portal where you can track your commissions more or less pretty easily. Should be able to contact somebody in agent support fairly easily, and they should be happy to help you out because you're the one putting them in keeping that insurance company in business. And it should be an overall pleasant experience to access information at will that you need to run your business effectively. This is less of a concern with most companies. Most companies do a decent job. There's a few that don't. But this, again, out of all of the must-haves with selections of final expense carriers, this is the least, it's important, but the least concerning, I guess you could say. All right, now on to my 5 top companies that I recommend new insurance agents selectively pick getting started. This may differ slightly to those agents who are experienced, and I'm sure those of you who are experienced might contest some of these, and I understand why. So understand, I kind of have a mantra when you have final expense carrier selection, and it's this. It's not what carriers are the best, it's what carriers are the least worst, okay? So each carrier out of these 5 must-haves, in most circumstances, will fit most of these, but sometimes there will be a definite lacking element of it, and that can't be overcome, which is why we select different carriers, so we can pick and choose depending on the unique scenario our client's in order to help them get them the best overall deal. Okay, so first carrier, and again, these are in no particular order either, so don't take it that way. First carrier is Security National. Security National Life is out of Salt Lake City, Utah. On the scale of final expense carriers, are smaller. However, I think smaller is better. They are more committed to the development and design and implementation of their final expense programs versus a lot of these larger carriers that are out there that just kind of dabble with it but don't seriously invest themselves for the long haul. Security National satisfies most of what I think is really important in having a good final expense carrier. Their underwriting is pretty clear most of the time. There are some discrepancies, but you get a decision within 24 hours on their carriers. The back-end support's fairly good. You can always call in, get a live human being, talk to an underwriter, get some help on a case if you need it. You're not going to be put in the dreaded call waiting for hours on end. It's a simplified application, probably the best thing about it. In most states, it's 4 to 5 pages for the primary final expense application. And they also have an e-application, which I understand, if you write it, you usually get a decision within 10 to 15 minutes, whether it's approved, preferred, standard, graded, or declined. That's awesome. And so it doesn't have a phone interview. I think they were saying they were looking at it at one point, but I don't necessarily even think you need one for Security National. But anyways, Security National, again, it's not perfect. There's some underwriting, I don't say discrepancies, but underwriting questions that are not going to fulfill everything that you'd want. But that's true of every company. But I think that in many states with new agents, Security National is a good pick. Second company that I think is worth having as a final expense agent is Family Benefit or Trinity Life. Same company, depends on the state you're in. I love this company. It, again, a much smaller company than most companies, but the designers of the product truly understand the final expense market. Let me list some of the advantages. First, there's a phone interview. The phone interview generally gives a decision at the end of the phone call, yay or nay. Number two, it's really designed for your healthier final expense prospects. So you're not going to get a lot of these niche cases through with them, which is totally fine. But in exchange, you get some of the best priced premiums in the business. What do they take as far as underwriting? They have 2-year look backs on cancer, heart problems. They actually take Coumadin and warfarin first day full coverage. Atrial fibrillation, arrhythmia, that's first day full coverage preferred. They also take, let's see what else, insulin use, as long as it started after the age of 40. That's huge. And diabetic neuropathy. Who would have thunk it? That's a hard one to get coverage for today. The application design itself is very simple. It's very difficult to screw it up. It is in some cases, 3-4 page application. It's not a lengthy 10-page application. It doesn't get replaced. I want to say right now our first year persistency is 95% in my group. That's incredible. That means 95 out of 100 final expense apps stay on the books. That's hard to find in this business. But that's a lot because of the fact of how competitive it is. And they also do what's called Social Security deposit date drafting. So when your client receives their money, we hit their account on that day. That may not sound like a big deal, but if the 3rd falls on Saturday, our clients get paid Friday. And if we set up on a date-specific draft, we can't draft them on the weekends. We draft them on a Monday. So our clients have the full weekend to blow their money on smokes and booze. And if we don't get the money, then it's a lapse. And again, it just causes all sorts of problems. So the deposit date draft hits on the deposit date. And so it really times in that draft. And they take Direct Express. They take checking, banking for either setup. So, I mean, man, I love this company a lot. I'm surprised there's not more people that write it. It's just one of the best ones that are out there. And the back-end support's pretty good as well. You can actually talk to the VP. Alvin's pretty reachable. A good guy as well. And, yeah, I mean, they're my favorite company, I would say, overall. For face-to-face final expense agents, there is no telephonic sales process oriented with them. Number 3 company. I'm getting ready for the tomatoes to be thrown at me. Transamerica. So some of you probably wondered, well, Transamerica, what do you mean? You experienced agents? No. Yeah, probably, well, too much that you know. It's this is a company that is a love-hate relationship. I don't like to include Transamerica or Transamerica, but I have to because it satisfies a lot of the big issues with final expense carriers, but has some blatant problems with it. So what is it good for? I think, first of all, the no BS underwriting is great about it. They take so much stuff that no other carrier takes. COPD, first day full coverage. If you've had a heart attack or heart issue within 1 to 2 years, standard first day full coverage pricing. Parkinson's is first day full coverage. I want to say lupus is as well, and multiple sclerosis. Weird stuff, but you'll come across it. They take blood thinners, Coumadin, warfarin, Plavix, as long as it's been 2 years since the event that caused it. Their prices are pretty competitive. They pay full commission at all ages. A lot of these carriers, they'll nickel and dime you, reduce your comp at certain ages, and I don't like that. Trans pays full comp at all ages. And you can track your business pretty well with Transamerica. So that's the extent. And they don't have a height weight chart. That just fits so much as I think a middle ground type of carrier to fill the gaps of what your primary carrier does, so that you can have something that you don't have to otherwise put into a guaranteed issue situation. So what do I don't like about Transamerica? Well, the biggest problem with Transamerica is that the application is typically 2 to 3 times in length of other applications, and you have to do the application by hand. The typical Transamerica final expense app will have 5 to 6 signatures, 5 to 6 dates, and the more that you've got to fill into, the more likely you're just going to run into these amendment problems, and that's kind of where the whole amendment reference comes from. You'll have to go back and get signatures from your client to keep the deal going, and the more that happens, the more problems ensue, obviously. And there's no phone interview too, and that makes it even more problematic. So you may have to do second trips based off of rate ups because of underwriting unforeseen issues that a phone interview could have handled. And you may have to go back because you forgot to get a form signed or something silly like that. And I've talked to all sorts of agents that one week they'll be happy with Transamerica. They love it. It fits so many deals. And then other days they'll just want to throw themselves off of the roof because of how bad they perceive the Transamerica internal requirements to get a policy issued are. So it's a love-hate relationship. I've always kind of been on the fence about this with new agents. I don't recommend this as a primary carrier. Again, I recommend it as a carrier to keep in backup because you're going to need it. You really will. But you want to really resist using them as a primary carrier if you can help it. And over time, though, like I've been doing Transamerica for 6-7 years, really since I started, I'm used to and accustomed to how they do. And so I always scrub my apps really cleanly. I know where they're good. I know where to stay away from certain underwriting conditions. But I've definitely lost business to learn that type of setup. So it's just something you got to deal with. All right, number 4, Mutual of Omaha. I really like Mutual of Omaha. Competitively priced, good phone interview. It's actually optional. You also have an e-app access. E-app is super easy. The underwriting is a little tight. They don't have, they're pretty tight with diabetic issues. They're tight with some mental health problems. Beyond that, they're okay for your healthy, but you're going to find situations where a Transamerica will do a better job and fit some of the underwriting issues better. So for me, Mutual of Omaha is just for healthy people that don't have a lot of medications, that are generally okay and in good shape, but they're not going to be a carrier that will have the weird circumstances that I'll be able to fit them into. And like I said, underwriting's okay. Competitive pricing for sure, though. There was some of the best pricing. Last but not least, I have to mention a guaranteed issue carrier, and this kind of changes by the year. American General, or AIG, is the go-to guaranteed issue carrier. It's competitively priced, pays decently, it advances. They do everything you want to. The other guaranteed issue carriers that are out there, like Gerber Life, Great Western, there's a few others, but not really worth mentioning. They don't really match up to what American General can do regarding pricing and just a whole package for the agents. So I hope this video was useful to you. Hope you learned a few things about some carriers maybe that you didn't know about that now you do. I can help you with those carriers. Just feel free to reach out to me at feagentmentor.com/contact or leave a comment below. And ultimately, though, I hope especially if you're new, understand a little bit more about how final expense carriers work and how to pick better carriers. You can be successful with any carrier in this business. The carrier won't necessarily make you or break you. Ultimately, it's up to you to achieve. There's plenty of examples of people who work these overpriced companies and captive circumstances that do decently and write a lot of business. But you don't know what they keep on the books. And the truth is that having the right setup with carrier selection enhances your overall performance. It enhances your overall quality of business. And it enhances the likelihood you're going to look at this as a long-term career to stay in this business, help people, and be financially free running a final expense life insurance business the way you want. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Please like the video and subscribe if you haven't. My name is Dave Duford, Final Expense Agent Mentor. Logging off. See you next time.